Hello there. Let's talk about some techniques for the minimization, optimization, and also from a regression perspective. So regression test process fundamentally we are looking at certain techniques that will allow us to reduce that effort, right? We would want an entire reduction. So I would ideally want it this way, that it would be wonderful that the test effort just reduces and probably remains a little constant over here. So this is during the project phases, and this is say during release 1, and after that release 2, after that release 3. But remember that, let's change the color here. What we are also looking at is that there is going to be certain effort here. This effort is all for the changed, deleted, modified pieces. Now, one part is the effort. The other piece that we want to look at from a process is the test setup. So test setup is going to be either constant or would change based on what features get added. For example, to our feature on a particular mobile phone that we developed, we added a functionality of syncing up data. I think a lot of applications are moving their data to the cloud. So with that, we had this app that collected data, built up data. Say it is an app that collects a lot of pictures, allows wonderful pictures to be taken, collages to be created, and allows certain editing. And to ensure that all these pictures get saved and are accessible to other applications that the user would like to choose, we start putting this on the cloud at user's choice. Now, initially you built the app as a collage app. Now you're looking at it with a very different perspective of pushing all the changes onto the cloud. Now, having said that, when things start going to the cloud, we now want sync up to happen. So we say start looking at sync up mechanisms between the app and the server. Now, as we start looking at these, changes are going to happen, so test setups are going to change. Maybe there is a server-side change that we are expecting. So test setups will start becoming more and more important. So what changes in the test setup? What are the configurations of the test setup? The next piece is test sequencing. How will test sequence matter? Test sequencing can also help us reduce certain testing. Let me give you an example here. So if I'm testing an ATM, and on the ATM, I have withdraw test cases. So in my first test case, I do the login and check balance. Then I deposit money. Then I deposit money, say deposit 100. Third, then I do withdraw 50. Fourth, withdraw 70. So this becomes a sequence. But then the outcome of these test cases would depend on what is as part of deposit. But 2 and 3 are such a sequence that I would have deposited 100 and then withdrawing 50, withdrawal would be successful and depends on how I have written the test case. Now if my fourth test case is going to expect that I withdraw 70 and the withdrawal should be successful, now I have an issue because I'm withdrawing 70, I've already withdrawn 50 and my deposit was 100, it assumes that my balance needs to be of X amount. Thus my sequencing would fail. So sequencing would definitely carry a meaning, and as we start looking at regression, maybe this sequencing is something that will help us reduce the number of scenarios, while not reducing the amount of functionality that we are trying to test. So the whole piece during regression, along with the execution that happens and the automation that we can bring in through output comparison, that will reduce the amount of time as well. Remember, doing more with less. That is what can be achieved by applying such techniques. Some are process, some are technology, some are domain driven. But those are the pieces which become goal for us to make sure we have aligned our techniques. So further, what do we have? Fundamental piece would be test selection. And I think the first option is so easy that I'm going to select all test cases. But you can imagine that over a period of time, my number of test cases are not going to reduce. It's not going to be so. Number of test cases are actually going to increase. So let me clean this up, and then we can draw a diagram again where we are seeing that the number of test cases, say, are increasing. Out of this, I would also want to make sure that my number of automated test cases are also increasing. So I may have least amount of automation, but now I'm able to automate and I have certain amount of automation in it. This would be awesome. Thus, my effort for testing should reduce. The only effort that I would need at any given point in time is this. This is my manual effort. This is the manual effort. Because you can imagine, so much is already automated. This is where a human being will not be required. Systems will be required. And it will happen when a human being is not present, if that's how we are going to automate. So this would form the key if I want to select all test cases. My need is I have to select all test cases. But selecting all, is that really making sense? Will all depend on how your test reports are, how the system is. Remember, if there is a little change in one of the components and our model that we have come up with says that it's really an independent model of a subsystem which does not impact others, interaction and interfaces that we would test, then we'll be able to isolate and say that yes, I don't need all test cases. I can do with little. The other way, again, is random. What do you think about random selection? Probably not a very good idea. Selection of test cases based on traversing tests. So now I have modifications which are done in my control flow graph. And to this control flow graph, what we have now added is further functions or further selection. I would now like to have new test cases marked here in green for us to make sure that these paths are also tested. This would be a mandate. We better have testing. The next is the minimization and prioritization, which we'll talk about as we go along. So minimization. Minimization is clear reduction. Reduce that test case. Reduce the set to a lower number. One of the things that comes to my mind very clearly is discard redundant test cases. If you're really designing prudently, you will definitely not have redundant test cases. But if you find one, discard it. Also, redundancy could be based on what we are trying to look at. As I start testing multiple rounds and certain area, you will never find issues because they were built very robust or they were made robust through testing and no longer are providing any kind of bugs for fixes, have remained stable, no changes are going in those parts, we should be able to make those test cases really redundant because they're just repeating, and we could put up criterias with respect to code coverage, requirements coverage, or form of data or control flow. Remember the traversal piece that we spoke about? That could be one of the important criterias that one could use. Or maybe any other criteria that you have, technical criteria. Prioritization. We select based on priority, we discard none. But again, we need a prioritization criteria C, which will talk about requirements coverage, code coverage, or a particular desired metric. It may be that one of the performance tests need to be prioritized, or it may be a load test that needs to be prioritized. Say we have a server which hosts our application. So this server hosts our application. Over a period of time, number of users who have started accessing this server has increased. Say this is in 2010, number of users were 50,000 and now it's going to 500,000. No changes to the server. 50K to 500,000 is a big change. So if I look at the server that is being deployed then and what it is supposed to do in say 2015, definitely our metric has changed. And such metrics are very domain, product, situation driven. Thus, that metric will need to be modeled, further looked at from a test case perspective, test coverage perspective, and of course, prioritization criteria, because if you have thousands of test cases, you will still need to prioritize some of them over the other. From a perspective, regression test and regression test selection, we definitely need certain algorithms. And certain algorithms typically are based on requirements or requirements analysis across the board. We would definitely need traceability matrix. Traceability matrix that allows a test case 1, test case 2, test case 3. We have a R1, R2, R3. If we have these 3 test cases testing unique requirements versus T2 and T3 test R2 and R3, then we may want to question and look at what these 2 test cases do. Have they really become redundant or they are unique in their own right? So for regression testing, we'll definitely have certain algorithms or certain ways of choosing those test cases. One of the things would be a traceability matrix. And of course, we are going to look up more algorithms in the next module. And once you have an algorithm, we'll also have tools to do the test selection for us. In fact, test management systems like TestLink, which can manage rounds related data, will also help understanding which need to be picked up for regression. The other way of looking at optimization is based on best of the element, best of the breed. and we look at a criteria that will call this best of the breed. And we looked at a test cases criteria best of the breed in very, very initial modules of software test methodologies. And further, optimization would be again based on techniques. These are the techniques that we will start looking at in detail in the modules which cover optimization, orthogonal array, combinatorial logic, or choice of values in equivalence class, and of course special value which comes in out of experience of test engineers in a particular domain. So looking at these are some of the techniques that we look at from a regression testing, from an optimization, minimization, prioritization piece. Each of these areas will need to be looked at from a lens of domain. We will also need to understand what is our perspective, a development engineer's perspective, a product manager's perspective, a project manager's perspective in making things happen for that particular product or a software platform. So things will change, but techniques and directions will still remain the same. Thank you.